In October 2000, an arrest took place at the railway station in Chelyabinsk, which at first glance appeared to be a routine preventive measure. Officers from the local police department noticed two men behaving strangely in the station building. They were twin brothers named Gabgelina, 28-year-old Ferit, and Timur. They were wandering aimlessly through the waiting rooms, attracting the anxious glances of passengers. Their unkempt appearance, incoherent movements, strange cries, and darting eyes caused people to feel genuine fear and disgust. The police decided to detain them to establish their identity and check their documents. A cursory check revealed that both men were regular patients at a psychoneurological clinic and were registered with a diagnosis of oligophrenia in the stage of debility. However, this was obvious even without a medical certificate. Their faces were distorted by immobile, dull expressions, their speech was confused, and their manner of communication was overly intrusive and childish, sometimes frightening in its lack of control. The increased attention to them was not only due to their appearance. A few days earlier, the mutilated corpse of a woman had been found near the station, under a railway bridge. As a result, the entire area was under close surveillance, and the station, as a gathering place for marginalized people and the homeless, was under special control. When the brothers were taken to the police station and questioned, they suddenly began to talk excitedly and enthusiastically, revealing such details that even the hardened investigators felt a chill run down their spines. Ferit and Timur, interrupting each other, began to describe with boastful vividness how they lured a woman under a bridge, how long they played with her, how they raped and tortured her, and then killed her. Their story was peppered with frightening details. Who held her, who beat her, who said what, who cut off a piece of her clothing, who set her hair on fire. All this was accompanied by nervous giggles, shouts, and, what particularly struck the investigators, the words, "We added another one to our collection." According to the brothers' testimony, the day before, they had encountered a woman who was intoxicated, after which they decided to take her under a bridge, where a serious crime was committed against her. The woman suffered serious injuries and was unable to resist. According to the detainee's confession, violent acts accompanied by cruel treatment were committed against the victim. The woman died from her injuries and abuse. The brothers described what happened without any signs of remorse, which shocked even experienced investigators. The unfortunate woman only regained consciousness occasionally, most often during those brief moments when the Genya brothers were tired or distracted by something else. But as soon as they caught their breath, it all started again. Two pairs of hairy hands, strong from hard work, clamped down on her thin neck with fury. That didn't seem enough to them. They used heavy army boots, iron bars, and stones lying at their feet. As if in some kind of insane, animalistic ritual, they repeatedly struck her already limp body. Later, during interrogations, the murderous brothers confessed to their other crimes, and one of them, Ferit, voluntarily agreed to show investigators the burial sites of the victims. Accompanied by an armed convoy, he was taken to the Mitrofanovskoye cemetery. For some time, he wandered among the grave mounds, as if remembering, and finally pointed to a pit about 7 meters wide. The excavations shocked even experienced investigators. 173 human skulls and hundreds of scattered bones belonging to men, women, and, judging by the size of some of the remains, even children lay in the ground. Forensic medical examination showed that some of these people died from traumatic brain injuries, while others died from gunshot wounds. Research has established that some of the remains date back to the 1920s and are likely victims of the Red Terror, a campaign of mass executions and repression carried out by the Bolsheviks against class enemies and those suspected of counter-revolutionary activity. However, judging by their condition and accompanying finds, the other skulls belonged to people who died in the 1990s. The investigation put forward a shocking theory. In the last decade of the 20th century, someone deliberately continued the mass killings, disguising them as old burials. Cemetery workers, who were subsequently questioned, admitted that they had never seen such terrible and deep excavations in all their lives. One of those who knew the brothers with mental disabilities well shared a memory that still gives him chills. "I will never forget the expressions on their faces. Dreamy, pensive, even happy. That is how the brothers looked when the next set of remains with broken skulls were removed from the grave during the investigative experiment. They showed no fear, felt no shame. On the contrary, they seemed proud of what they had done. Later, they promised to deal with me too, allegedly for talking too much. And to back up their words, they showed me a pit prepared in advance for my body, a silent threat buried in the ground. But that's not all. The place where they hid the bodies was not chosen at random. The cemetery where they took the investigators was well known to them since childhood. Back then, while still students at a school for mentally disabled children, they would play in the cemetery instead of attending classes. While their peers played ball or collected stamps, Ferret and Timur crawled over old graves, digging up the earth as if searching for treasure. Over the years, their games became increasingly perverse. When they grew up a little, one of the most vivid pleasures, as they themselves put it, was forever etched in their memory. Digging up recently buried corpses from fresh graves and dismembering them to see what was inside. They did this supposedly out of curiosity, but over time, by their own admission, they began to experience real bliss from such actions, something akin to narcotic ecstasy. It was no longer enough for them to simply see blood. They wanted to feel like the creators of pain and death. Ferret and Timur were born into an extremely dysfunctional family. Their father, Gabdul K. Dulan, a chronic alcoholic and repeat offender, was once again serving time for theft and assault when his sons were born. Their mother led a marginal lifestyle, often disappearing from home for several days, and when the boys turned 3, she finally abandoned them and left to wander, becoming a vagrant. Since then, the children had been raised by their grandmother, who had neither the strength nor the desire to fully engage in their development. From an early age, Ferret and Timur showed signs of serious behavioral issues. A medical examination found that both had mental retardation. They were deemed unteachable within the standard school curriculum, so they spent their entire childhood in a special education class for children with severe mental retardation. From childhood, Ferret and Timur showed no interest in the learning process. Studying seemed like a pointless activity to them, something alien and hostile. They chronically skipped classes, avoided teachers, and ignored any attempts at education. Instead of school desks, they had the streets of their hometown, and their main teacher was the street and its harsh, merciless lessons. They had little contact with their grandmother, who was officially their guardian, and at times were openly hostile toward her, considering her weak and unnecessary. The twins spent most of their time on the streets, loitering in doorways, garages, vacant lots, and one of Chelyabinsk's city cemeteries. It was there that they gradually became involved in vandalism. For them, destroying monuments, breaking tombstones, and desecrating graves was not a crime, but entertainment. From an early age, the brothers earned a living by doing odd jobs and petty theft. They picked pockets on public transport, stole food at markets, and sometimes even robbed drunk passers-by. But they never stayed anywhere for long, not at any job, not in any group. They only felt comfortable together, in their own closed universe. When they grew up, their lives never improved. Both had criminal records and had served at least one prison term each. After returning from prison, they settled in the village of Kolyapivka, in the house where their father had once lived. By that time, he had given up crime, found a job as a loader, and was trying to live modestly, quietly, without unnecessary fuss. But the house where the twins settled soon became a place far more sinister than any prison. There, behind the dilapidated walls, their second secret life began to unfold, a life full of fear, pain, and blood. The leader of the duo was Ferret. He was the first to cross the line between the dead and the living. His path to murder began, as with many maniacs, with cruelty to dead bodies, but soon that was not enough. He committed his first murder alone, at the age of 16. The victim was a young girl, a budding artist. That evening, she was returning home along a forest road, carrying a fresh canvas, a painting created with love and care. The girl hurried home, dreaming of showing her parents her new creation. But fate had other plans. Ferret emerged from the shadows, lurking among the trees like a predator. He attacked her swiftly, with cold calculation. He tortured the girl for a long time right where he caught her. Despite all the diagnoses and officially recognized mental retardation, Farid Dulan was quite capable of controlling his actions. He was distinguished by his coolness, calculation, and animal cunning. Outside the walls of the colony, he did not become reformed. On the contrary, he emerged even more cruel, gloomy, and unpredictable. He spent all his time either in the cemetery, among the graves and tombstones, where he felt almost at home, or wandering through the forests, his favorite hunting grounds. It was there that he felt freedom, strength, and power over life and death. The monster's next victim was Tamara Rukavishnikova, a young woman and mother of 2 children. She had received alimony from her alcoholic ex-husband at the savings bank building. Farid had tracked her down in advance, knowing when and how much she would receive and where she would go. He waited for her like a predator, patiently and emotionlessly. When the woman left the bank and turned toward her yard, he approached her, pretending it was by accident, and struck her. The attack was swift. He struck her several times, snatched her bag of money, and fled. For him, it was not just theft, not just murder, it was a triumph over someone else's life. Her 2 children were left orphaned. He didn't even look back. A little time passed, and a new target appeared. In a wooded area near the village of Gobelinov, he noticed a slender figure. 12-year-old Nadia was returning home from school. She heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw him. A tall, dark figure. There was something inexplicably sinister, frightening, and cold about his appearance. She froze, and he stood there looking at her, as if waiting for a reaction. He wanted her to be scared, to talk to him, to start begging. He wanted her to see him as a man, to feel fear and submission. He even tried to impress her. He began to undress, demonstrating his power, convinced that the girl would definitely notice him, be frightened, and thus recognize his authority. But that didn't happen. Nadia didn't scream or speak. She slowly began to back away, ready to run at any moment. And then Farid boiled over. His eyes filled with blood, and his animal instincts took over. In one leap, he closed the distance and grabbed the girl by the arm. She tried to break free, but the strength was unequal. He dragged her into the thicket, into the heart of the forest, where no one would hear her screams, and there he began his cruelty. Hours of torture, violence, pain. But Nadia, despite all this, remained alive. Her breathing, though weak, irritated him, drove him mad. He couldn't finish what he had started on his own. So he returned home and brought his brother with him. Timur didn't need to be persuaded. It was enough for him that Farid reminded him of those very adventures in childhood. How the 2 of them wandered around the cemetery, dug up graves, how their mother abandoned them to their fate, giving them neither love nor protection. Knowing exactly where their next victim lived, the brothers acted calmly and confidently. They killed her without much resistance, using the same grim ritual as before. The woman's body was buried in their favorite place, the long-closed Mitrofanovskoye cemetery. It was there, in the shadow of the crooked crosses and marble slabs, in what was once a place of mourning and had now become the personal crypt of 2 ruthless killers, that they secretly carried the bodies. After this incident, Farid and Timur finally joined forces, becoming a well-oiled duo. But now they operated according to a new, more sophisticated plan. The brothers specifically tracked down women who, according to their calculations, had no relatives. These were most often visitors without a permanent place of residence or lonely pensioners whom no one would report missing. As a rule, no one noticed the disappearance of such women, and no one looked for them. The murders were carried out quickly and quietly. They hid the bodies in the same place, the long-forgotten, abandoned Mitrofanovskoye cemetery. It was there, during the investigation, that a gruesome burial site was found. Dozens of bodies buried without coffins, documents, or funeral services. The murders merged into one terrible chain. The investigation established that one of the schemes used by the brothers was the so-called help for pensioners. They approached women on the streets, near markets and shops, and offered to carry their bags and help them get home. In their twisted logic, this seemed like a noble gesture. Elderly people, accustomed to seeing beggars and vagrants as unfortunate rather than dangerous, trusted them. And it was this trust that proved fatal. Once inside the victim's home, the brothers first satisfied their perverted sexual fantasies. Then, just as cold-bloodedly, methodically, and emotionlessly, they killed. Sometimes with particular cruelty, using whatever objects were at hand, just to finish what they started. One such crime was the murder of a woman near the Privozny Bridge in October of that same year, which is where this whole horrific story began. It was then that investigators first suspected that it was not a lone perpetrator but a pair operating in the region. During the preliminary investigation and then in the courtroom, the brothers' behavior shocked even the most experienced prosecutors. They showed no remorse. On the contrary, they talked about their exploits with pride, as if they were not talking about a series of brutal murders, but about some kind of heroic journey. They recalled every detail, bragged to each other, and lively discussed which of them had performed better. The Chelyabinsk Regional Court sentenced Ferit Dulin to life imprisonment in a special regime colony. Timur Dulin was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment in a strict regime colony for his participation in 4 murders proven by the investigation and the court. After the verdict was handed down, his brother, Ferit Dulin, was transferred to one of the harshest prisons in Russia, the Black Dolphin Special Regime Correctional Colony, located in the Orenburg region. This institution is known for its extremely harsh conditions and serves as a place where the country's most dangerous criminals are sent. While in custody, Ferit unexpectedly gave additional confessions. He stated that in 2002, 2 years before his arrest, he had committed another murder that no one had previously known about. According to him, the crime took place at a railway station in the city of Zlatoust, in the Chelyabinsk region. He allegedly attacked a man in a public toilet, inflicting multiple stab wounds to his chest and abdomen, from which he died on the spot. However, this confession raised serious doubts among both the investigators and the supervisory authorities. According to official data, in 2002, Ferit Dulin was already in prison, serving a sentence for another case, and could not physically have been at the Zlatoust railway station. Moreover, he was arrested back in 2000, which means that he could not have committed the crime in question. Experts suggested that Dulin was either deliberately confusing the investigation or that his mental state had completely deteriorated due to his long imprisonment and isolation. Nevertheless, his statements were documented, and a check was initiated in the archives for matches with unsolved murders from the early 2000s. Some police officers suggest that even if Ferit did not commit this particular crime, he may have been involved in other, previously unknown incidents that have never been solved. While Ferit has been permanently isolated from society and is practically doomed to die behind bars, his brother Timur will soon be a free man again. His 25-year sentence is coming to an end. According to the Federal Penitentiary Service's calculations, Timur Dulin should be released in the winter of 2025.